Welcome to the KMVT Candidates Debate, the City Council Candidates Debate that we have here at KMVT every 2 years. I'm Seth Shostak. It was Tip O'Neill who said that all government is local. Well, if all government is local, then tonight's debate is all government, because of course it is local. As you know, the Mountain View City Charter specifies 7 council members, the governance of your city. And they are elected for a 4-year term, but there are elections every 2 years because the terms are staggered. So 3 or 4 council members are elected every second year in even number years. And you may have noted 2010 happens to be an even number. So we are replacing 3 of the council members, maybe not replacing them, maybe the incumbents will be winning. We have 5 of the 6 candidates for these 3 slots here tonight. Mr. Aaron Jabari is not here. He will not be participating in this debate, but 5 of the other candidates are. What we're going to do is each of the candidates will be introduced and they'll make a quick 30-second statement about themselves. And after that, we're going to get into the nitty-gritty, ask them some penetrating questions, grill them like a cheese sandwich, and hopefully you will be able to see which of the candidates accede to your exacting requirements for City Council. So let me not say any more about the general process. Let's get right into it. And I'm going to start at my right, your left, introducing the candidates and having them say something about themselves. The first person is Ronit Bryant. She's the incumbent mayor of the city of Mountain View. Ronit, 30 seconds. Tell us something about what your plans are for a second term should you win it.
Thank you, Seth. I'm Ronit Bryant. I'm very proud to serve as mayor of Mountain View this year, which is my 4th year on council. I've always been an active and involved resident. When I see a problem, I work to resolve it, and that's how I got involved in city affairs, to protect and enhance the city that I love and where I've raised my 3 kids. Mountain View is in good shape. We've balanced the budget without going into reserves. We've enhanced services for youth. We're planning for the future. We've added park space. We're actively engaged in protecting the city during the high-speed rail process. I ask for your vote November 2nd. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ronit. Our second candidate is Margaret Abe-Koga. Margaret is a council member. She's one of the incumbents. She's a former mayor. She's lived in Mountain View for 12 years. So that gives you some insight into the opportunities and perhaps the problems of our city. Margaret, your statement.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Margaret Abe-Koga, and I'm your current council member and was your mayor last year. I'm a local gal. I was born at Stanford Hospital, grew up in San Mateo, and we moved to Mountain View in 1998, as was mentioned, when my husband and I were looking to buy our first home. We currently live in the old Mountain View neighborhood with my 2 children who are in elementary school and my mother. And my father was the one who instilled in me the importance of community service, and so I've been involved in community and public service for the last 17 years, currently, as mentioned, a council member and former mayor, and I've worked hard these last 4 years to maintain our quality of life and ensure a responsible city government. I'm proud of my track record of leadership and results, and I look forward to hopefully being able to continue my service to this wonderful community.
Thank you very much, Margaret. The third person at this table, yet another incumbent, we seem to have segregated the incumbents from the challengers over here, is Jack Siegel. Jack is a former aerospace engineer and manager. He's currently vice mayor of the city. Jack, your statement.
Thank you. Thank you for tuning in this evening, and I welcome the chance to address you. So I've lived in this city more than 30 years, and I really hope to be reelected so I can help lead this council to a very sustainable Mountain View, which includes many issues, those of which are financial, environmental, and human or social issues. I think the 3 must be in combination in order to keep us in a very strong, wonderful city that we have. I want to keep Mountain View with amount of growth in a smart way. We need to grow, but we need to do it very smartly. And my issues are basically neighborhood preservation and smart growth, more open space, parks and athletic fields, and accountability to Mountain View citizens. So I hope you re-elect me so I can continue on the path that has been behind us now. We are in good shape, and I'm number 4 on the ballot, but number 1 in experience. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack. we're in good shape. I'm glad to hear that. I've heard that from several. Maybe the incumbents have a different idea. We'll begin with Daniel Brian Walonis. Dan is a software engineer at Google, right? He's a 17-year resident of this city. Dan, take it away.
I grew up in Ohio, and I received my Bachelor and Master's of Science degrees in computer science from the Ohio State University. And what really kind of interested me into local politics was I attended some of the budget meetings, and I downloaded the 400-page PDF of the city budget and slogged through that, and you start looking at some of the numbers, some of the things may catch you off guard. So I was kind of surprised by the things, and the city council, they did manage to make what they called a structurally balanced budget, but there were certainly some one-time things that were a little interesting. So a sustainable city budget is one of my big issues. The second big issue is what I call sensible growth, and that's for both housing and businesses as well as for parks. And really the final objective of mine is more transparent government, to make sure that everything that the city government does is available for people to find online, and that there's some way that they can discuss it or get feedback from and to the city council members. So.
You've talked about searchable government, haven't you?
That's absolutely right.
That's not an inheritance from working at Google, is it?
They've really instilled the message into me well, and it's just amazing how liberating it is to be able to find stuff and to let a computer who's really good at finding stuff help you out.
Our final candidate in the debate is Greg David. Greg is an entrepreneur. He's a native son of Mountain View. Greg, your statement.
Well, as he said, I'm a native resident of Mountain View, 40 years. I'm a product of local schools, local public schools. I hold a Associates of Arts degree from Foothill College and a Bachelor of Science degree in Business Management from San Jose State University. Quality of life is one of the reasons why I've chosen to stay in Mountain View. And one of the things that drew me to run for city council is so that I could make common sense decisions to preserve this quality of life that we all enjoy in Mountain View. And playoff Jack's thing, I'm going to say I'm last on the ballot, but hopefully your first choice on November 2nd.
Thank you, Greg. All right, well, let's get into it. Let's get into some of these questions. One of the big issues that seems to be roiling the entire peninsula, if not the entire state, is the high-speed rail initiative. Any of you who have traveled abroad know that this is perhaps the only first or even second world country in the world that doesn't really have high-speed rail. And most of the proposals are for high-speed rail to the east of the Mississippi, actually. The only thing west of the Mississippi, as far as I know, is the high-speed train from San Francisco to Los Angeles, intended to be completed by, I think it's 2015, I don't know what it is, 2020, something like that, 2020. And this is a big project, $43 billion. It's going to run from San Francisco right down the peninsula, right through your city, if they build it. And it's going to take you down to Los Angeles in a little over 2 hours. $43 billion. I might point out that Caltrain is cutting service and raising rates because they've got a deficit of $2.3 million. That's 20,000 times less than the amount to be spent on California high-speed rail. But there's a lot of problems, it seems, with this initiative with some of the cities on the peninsula. So I want to know from these candidates how you feel about California high-speed rail, about having those high-speed trains run through Mountain View, and the possibility of having a station here, the only station between San Francisco and San Jose here in Mountain View. Renee, would you like to start on this?
Sure. I've been very active and involved on this issue because if it does come through Mountain View, it will have a very major effect on us. Now, there will be a station in Millbrae, so it'll be San Jose, Millbrae, and San Francisco. The question of the degree of effect it will have on us will depend on the vertical alignment, meaning will it be just on the tracks alongside Caltrain? Will it be on an elevated structure? Will it be in a tunnel? Will it be in an open trench? Will it be in a closed trench? At this point, our best option seems to be having it in a trench so that our downtown isn't very impacted, and we might actually be able to have some enhancements, like if we cover the trench, we could have a greenway between Castro Street and Ranksov Park, which would actually be a very good thing for the city because we want a walkable and bikeable city. As far as the station is concerned, the High Speed Rail Authority is marketing the station as a chance to reimagine an area, which is great if you are living in a blighted area, but we are very happy with our downtown. We do not want to reimagine it. We've just had a visioning process as part of the update of our general plan, and what we heard from our residents was we'd like to make some changes, some improvements in the downtown, fairly minor ones, but we don't want to start afresh. Having a high-speed rail station with 3,000 parking lots, with reconfiguring freeways so the traffic comes off the freeway directly downtown, is very, very foreign to the vision we have for our downtown.
Well, so what you're saying then, Ronit, is high-speed rail, great, as long as you sort of hide the train. You don't want a station in Mountain View. Do other people have differing views on that? Anybody want the station here in Mountain View?
Well,
yeah,
I mean,
Dan.
actually, I'm sorry. I don't want the station in Mountain View, and actually, I voted against the proposition back in 2008. And the interesting thing that's come out of it is that they've halved the projection of the number of riders. They've doubled the ticket and construction costs. And I really think California was sold a bill of goods. And it sounds like there are lawsuits, and it sounds like I know Palo Alto is entering in a lawsuit. So I mean, this thing may not even happen. So I'm.
But what's your
I certainly don't want a station in Mountain View.
How about high-speed rail in general?
Well, I mean, as Ronit said, the place right now for it is it's an already built up area. I mean, the whole Caltrans corridor is pretty built up, and high-speed rail is something that may require better planning with more space in some other community, but not down the peninsula. I just don't think it's going to work anywhere down the peninsula. If anything, like maybe down Gilroy Mountain or Morgan Hill or something, or very south of San Jose, where they actually have some space where they could create these tracks.
So you would start your journey south of the city. You
right.
Maybe started in San Jose. Is anybody worried about the fact that San Juan Bautista, about 100 and some years ago, made the same decision? They didn't want the railroad running through their town, and that's why they were marginalized. In fact, now it's just a little tourist town. Yes, Jack?
Yeah, I would like to remind everyone that what we're dealing with also is a high-speed rail authority. So they do have the authority to do what they want to do and will do what they want to do. So if they want to put a station in Mountain View, they have the authority to do it. We can oppose it, but we can't stop it if that's what really wants to happen. I would not like to see the station in Mountain View based on the information that High-Speed Rail Authority has now given us. If that changes, certainly we could reconsider that. But at this time, to so drastically change our downtown by putting a station in there, which you in Mountain View will not even be able to use. You will be discouraged from using it on the peninsula. You will still be asked to use Caltrain. The way they're going to control this, according to the authority, is they will charge you 3 times as much to ride the high-speed rail versus Caltrain. You will have to take Caltrain to San Jose or San Francisco and then get on the high-speed rail to use it. You really need to understand a lot of details about
Jack,
this.
I honestly don't understand that. You
Yeah.
might not be able to use it for commuting to San Francisco, but certainly you can get on it and ride to L.A.
You will be encouraged of getting on the train, a Caltrain, going to San Jose, and then getting on
So what's the
high-speed
point
rail.
of having the station in Mountain View if you can't get off on it?
Well, that's
What's the point?
Margaret.
and that's exactly what I started to think. Originally, I did support at least looking at a station in Mountain View. I thought, well, if it's going to come through our city, maybe we should be able to get some use of it. But given we had a study session, we were given the parameters of what we would need to do, and it looks like it's a stretch to fit in downtown Mountain View. So for me, I'm moving away from the idea of a station. What really is important to me is connectivity, and so the station in San Jose or Millbrae, for those north of us, to be able to get to those stations conveniently is key. And I've been on the VTA for the last 4 years, and so transportation has become a big issue for me. And like you said, Caltrain is in trouble, which is really a shame because Caltrain is one of our best systems right now. It has a fare box recovery of about 50%. It's one of our most successful transit systems, and so I think we need to try to save Caltrain and make it complement whatever high-speed rail ends up being.
Greg, you haven't weighed in on this.
I could probably talk for hours on high-speed rail.
Well, we don't have hours. But
And everybody here has heard my views on it. In general, I am very much in support of of high-speed rail being built. I voted for the initiative. I think that if it's done correctly, it could be a huge benefit. As far as Mountain View getting a station or not, I think that it's far too early to make an educated decision as to whether we would support that or not. I think that the High-Speed Rail Authority just simply hasn't given us enough info yet. I personally think that a station could benefit the city as a stop on the high-speed system. I think another thing that people fail to see about high-speed rail is the improvements that it's going to make to Caltrain. Everything that comes in here is going to affect both Caltrain and high-speed rail. And by the time the system is launched, actually probably before the system's launched, you're going to have upgrades to Caltrain in the sense of that every crossing is going to be grade separated. There'll be no more grade crossings. There'll be no more horns. There'll be no more diesel locomotives. It'll be 100% electrified. It will be a quiet system running on welded rails that is just so completely different than what we currently have. And I think a lot of people just don't understand this in general. There's a huge, huge NIMBY effect going on here, especially up further up the peninsula. It seems in Mountain View it's kind of split more, and perhaps some people are a little more enlightened, to the benefits. But I think we need more information.
Well, you speak of NIMBYism. I can't help but noting that it took longer to build the light rail line from Mountain View down to San Jose than it took to build the Transcontinental Railroad. I'm sure many of you are aware of that, but it is nonetheless true. Let me ask you this. I mean, how do you feel about the general aviation at Moffett Field? That might be an alternative. You don't have high-speed rail, then the air traffic's going to increase. Do you prefer that? Anybody prefer that?
I don't think anybody would prefer that.
Nobody would.
That's
Absolutely not.
Maybe some people who have private planes would prefer that. Well, okay.
But Seth,
Yes.
those are not the two options. Those are not the only two options. It doesn't have to be high-speed rail through the peninsula on the Caltrain tracks versus aviation. That's not the way high-speed trains were built in Europe either. They have their dedicated tracks. There has not been an analysis of where the best place for the high-speed rail would be. The assumption was that using the Caltrain right-of-way would make the system less expensive. The assumption was also that putting the high-speed rail on an elevated structure would make it comparatively inexpensive, if you want to call $43 billion inexpensive, but it's inexpensive compared to double that price. So, and that's how it moved forward, and that's what the numbers still look like. The numbers are still based on an elevated structure down the peninsula. Now, there are obviously other options. Why would it not go along the freeway? There's lots of options. We are not in a position where it has to be like this, or else you will have airplanes taking off Moffett every 5 minutes, the way they used to many years ago when the P3s were there.
Yeah, but I could imagine taking down 101 interferes with grade separation. I mean, there are a lot of technical challenges.
I don't even think that would be a reasonable proposition.
Gradients and so forth.
So
yeah.
One more comment. You mentioned San Juan Bautista decided they didn't want it. The current original train was built through Mountain View in 1875. And I think that we need a modern train system. Somebody had the foresight to put in this system. And I think we need to have the foresight to put in another system, but we need to do it right. And we need to pay for it. Many of us may not ever see it because I don't think it's going to take 10 years. I think it'll take considerably longer. But just the same, we need to be able to be paying for that now for people to be using in the future, just like people did for us in the past. So I'm a proponent of it, but let's do it right.
Okay, we have one more quick question, then we're going to go to Man on the Street.
Well, and the interesting thing is just last week, Google announced these vehicles that are sort of autonomous. I mean, they can drive themselves. So a train is a huge, huge, huge capital outlay. It's a huge expense outlay, and once you build it, you're really locked into it. Like, let's look into well, what if there's hybrid cars? What if you could hop in a van that has no driver? You have your laptop. It might take a little longer to get down to LA, but at least you didn't have to do anything. I mean, so there are alternatives to the train for transit. Well, I mean, Google has this Google has this technology. I would think the private sector would do much better than the government.
So you as an individual might have one of these automated cars.
Or there might be there's yellow cab and there's orange cab and whatever cab. They could have other transit services that could run people.
What about the capacity problems? That's a big problem for the freeways. The
Well,
road system
once
in general.
you know, the congestion issue is once you get out of the sort of metropolitan areas, like on I-5 and stuff, it's not quite as bad. So I think that there's probably some room for that kind of thing. Plus, you potentially pull some of those people who were in their cars going down to LA. Now they hop in, you know, a minibus or something, and they're sitting on their laptop or they're quietly enjoying their ride as an alternative of being on the road.
Or using their cell phones.
Or even using their cell phones.
All right, I hate to derail this conversation because it's, you know, it's heated, it's important, it's one of the biggest issues, I think, on the peninsula these days. But in fact, we're going to go to another issue, which is the question of high-rise development here in Mountain View. And to do this, our Mountain View, our KMVT, I should say, KMVT camera crews went out onto the streets to talk to people about how they felt about this sort of development.
My question to the council members or the upcoming candidates is about high-rise housing developments, and how would you guys be able to listen to the inputs of the neighborhood associations and the members of the neighborhood, where it comes the majority of the houses are low single homes, and you are allowing developers to build high-rises homes.
They're posing a question about high-rise development, and implicitly, do you favor it? And if so, how should it be structured, regulated? Jack, yes.
Yeah, I'll start on this one. I have a proven track record of listening to the residents of Mountain View, starting back to the Mauna Loma with the Mayfield Mall Development Project, with Wagon Wheel, with Hetch Hetchy, with other projects, including the Prometheus project downtown, which I'm not against higher density housing as long as it's done properly, and that means it must have adequate parking. To stick our heads in the sand and say that there's no parking problem downtown or no traffic problems, it's just a mistake. I think it's wrong. I think that any new development that goes in should be able to have enough support for itself, which would include adequate parking, look at the traffic issues that are going to be caused, the schools and location, the parks and location to it, is transportation close to it. If it's done in a proper way, then yes, we could have some higher development here. 4 or 5 stories is not out of the question in my mind. But it depends. It depends on where it's in the neighborhood, how it affects the neighborhood, the setbacks, what else it stops, whether it's views, whether it's you know, other pieces of information that have to be looked at, but must be looked at individually. And above all, we should listen to the residents of the neighborhoods where it's going to be done.
Well, can I just follow up a little bit on that? Because you say, you know, you look at the various impacts, things like traffic. But there's no doubt that more development means more traffic. So how do you judge what's reasonable and what's not reasonable?
You look at the traffic studies that are done, and they always come out that there's no issue. You can add and add and add, and it still never becomes an issue. I have watched EIR's, environmental impact reports, for about 12 years now, combination of the Environmental Planning Commission and the City Council, but yet there's never been any impact to the traffic in the city of Mountain View. It now takes 30 minutes to go across town during many times of the day when you used to be able to drive across in 10 minutes. I don't know how this miracle happened, but somehow it did.
That's no impact. Margaret.
Well, you know, Mountain View is an attractive place to live, and I think people are going to want to continue to come live here. So we do have to increase our housing stock. I support all types of housing. I think, as Jack mentioned, it's how it fits into the neighborhood, to the character. I know the lady mentions high rises. I don't envision Mountain View having 10, 20-story high rises. Frankly, I don't think we have the room to do that. But 4 or 5 stories, that's what we're looking at through our general plan update. I think it's important to look at the impacts and try to mitigate in terms of traffic. Let's look at putting them near transit nodes, and those are the smart growth principles we talk about, or near retail, where folks can walk and bike to get their business done, or get on the bus rather than having to drive across town. So I think it's important where we put it, and then how it fits into the neighborhood, and mitigating the issues that may come up from.
So it's sort of a yes, but.
Yeah.
Well, I think for me the interesting numbers that I found when I was sort of researching the city is 57% of the housing units are rentals. So versus 33% of the national average. So Mountain View has lots and lots of rental properties. So I would think if there are new properties built, I think we should as a council certainly encourage ownership in Mountain View, so people can set their roots into Mountain View and stay. The other advantage is for these condos and townhomes.
Are you implying that the high-rise would be less likely to be
well, right.
Well,
no, because I mean, there's certainly townhomes and condos, within a high-rise, so that would be fine. I mean, there is the density there. The other advantage is certainly from a tax base as well. As each of those units are sold, then Prop 13 can be reevaluated, and the city potentially gets more benefit from it. As opposed to if it was just apartments, that property would be assessed at some value that will be largely static and not changing over time. So,
Greg,
so every one of us, I think, agrees that any new developments, high density / high rise, however you want to define high rise, needs to be neighborhood appropriate. They need to be put in places where they're not going to be affecting the existing look and feel of the neighborhood. As far as especially like Old Mountain View, it's very sensitive to that type of thing. You're not going to go plunk down a 5-story condo complex in the middle of Mauna Loma. It's not neighborhood appropriate, and I think everybody agrees on that. But one of the most important things that I think needs to be hammered every single time one of these projects is approved is there accessibility? Is there enough parking? That has to be there. It's no matter how much we want to think people are going to get out of their cars, they're most likely not.
Well, they'll have cars in any case.
And that is the type of thing that affects quality of life. When you've got lack of parking, you've got all of the street parking taken up, you've got increased traffic to these places, and you need to listen to what the residents want. It's what the residents want is what should be decided.
Let me turn this back to the incumbents table here.
I haven't actually answered yet.
Let me just ask you this. We've been talking about this somewhat theoretically, but are there any concrete examples of this issue, before the city now? Yes. Or is it all just, well, this is likely to happen? Ronit?
Well, currently, I mean, the most contentious item in the past year has been the Prometheus development downtown, which is 4 stories, so that doesn't count as high-rise for most people, especially since the sides facing neighbors are very much in proportion to what they're facing. If it's 2 floors, it's 2 floors. If it's 3, it's 3. 4 stories facing the high-speed rail is not, in my opinion, a problem. There have been examples that have come before council of higher density developments, and they weren't very high density developments, but they were plonked in the middle of a neighborhood. For example, along the Hetch Hetchy Trail, where there is a very constrained piece of property, and the developer tried to put in as many buildings as possible. And if they couldn't be organized in a way that made sense, that looked like a neighborhood, too bad. Let's just plunk a building right here because it can still be shoehorned. And I voted that down, and so did most of the rest of council, because we do need to look at where we put the development. It does need to be, if we go higher density, and in some places in Mountain View, we have gone higher density along transit corridors where there are services, because we hear very clearly from our residents, we heard in the general plan visioning, that people want preserved neighborhoods, have a walkable city. And there are people who are interested in not having 3 cars, in maybe living near the train tracks because at least one of a pair would like to use the train. So we can't just say the 1950s was perfection itself. This is the way it's going to be from now on into eternity. There are people, not everyone, there are people who want to live a little differently, and we should have some options for them.
Well, I think that this speaks to maybe a somewhat larger problem that maybe we could get into here now.